Coming up next on Arizona Horizon's Journalist Roundtable, we'll hear why Governor Doug Ducey revisited his state land trust plan and find out why a former state lawmaker wants to add 4 people to the Independent Redistricting Commission. The Journalist Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon's Journalist Roundtable. I'm Steve Goldstein, sitting in for Ted Simons, who has the night off. Joining us tonight, Jeremy Duda of the Arizona Capital-Times, Mike Sunnix of the Phoenix Business Journal, and Hank Stevenson of the Arizona Capital-Times. This past Wednesday, Governor Ducey spoke more about his plan to put money back into public schools. Jeremy, a brief history lesson. What was in this initial plan and what's the feedback been so far?
Well, this was Governor Ducey's plan to temporarily increase funding to K-12 schools from the state land trust. Now, it normally pays out 2.5%, of its earnings per year. He wants to increase that to 10% for 5 years and then down to 5% for another 5 years. Total for about $2.2 billion extra dollars to K-12 for over the course of a decade. On Wednesday, he told us he is considering some changes to this. First and foremost, one of the things that this plan would do is it puts all this new money in, but at the end of it, at least after 5 years, when most of the money dries up, you have this big fiscal cliff where schools are going to be trying to figure out how to plug a hole of about $250,000 or more. He said that once the final version of this is introduced to the legislature, that will be addressed. They're looking at some changes, and I think what a lot of this is probably the result of not having the votes right now.
Mike, I thought the timing was interesting, considering there was that ASU study that came out in which the economists said great things. Of course, there was some criticism because it was the Koch brothers support this particular school, but this seems like the timing is odd because it seems like Ducey did have some support for this.
Yeah, I mean that study and what the economist said is maybe tempered how much we want to spend from the surplus and the rainy day fund. I think there's some support out there for the state trust land in general. You have folks on the right, fiscal conservatives that question it. You have folks on the left, the teachers union, that want more money now. But that's the key is I think a lot of people say, well, we need more money now. We have this surplus sitting out there, and there's a lot of pressure on the governor and Republicans in the legislature to do something about not only the education lawsuit that's sitting out there, but our low standing in teacher pay and classroom spending. And we have all this cash out here. Why don't we use it for something very worthwhile? K-12 education.
And Ducey's getting a lot of credit. I read the Republic editorial today about, this is how you lead on education. The reason that he's open to compromise here is he doesn't have the votes to get it through the legislature. No way, no how at this point. So he's realizing that he has to compromise to some degree. And I wonder if this compromise is going to be enough because, as you said, both people on the right, people on the left are asking for more. They're saying this is a good start, this is a good part of the solution, but this is not a solution in and of itself.
Now, you also have some folks on the right over in the legislature who are saying we're not entirely sure that we should be putting more money into K-12 right now, at least until we get some assurances of how it's going to be spent, less administrative spending, some assurances and safeguards. On the Democratic side, you have people who just don't really like the land trust plan in the first place. He's kind of getting attacked from both sides. Some of this is coming, of course, from Treasurer Jeff DeWitt, who launched a number of broadsides against this plan, and the fiscal cliff issue was one of those primary concerns that he expressed.
I think the messaging kind of goes against the governor on this. The state trust land thing is a little complicated for people. You're explaining fiscal cliffs and what we're spending and what happens now with state trust land. And I think for even your average business owner, your average teacher, your average family out there, they would like to see, hey, the state's going to spend this much more or put this much more money into education now instead of this kind of more complicated, it's a ballot measure, and you kind of lose people in terms of what kind of resonance this has in terms of improving education spending.
Not only that, they've been talking about $2.2 billion as if that's a chunk of money that's going into the education system now. You divide that by 10 years, divide that by about a million students, you're looking at really, $300.
What struck me, though, and coming back to what you said, Jeremy, is it seemed as if the conversation had actually changed, where in the past it was, maybe we should spend more, maybe not. It did seem to me that most stakeholders, maybe they're not sure where they want the money to come from, but I'm interested in some of these more conservative lawmakers who really aren't even convinced yet we need to spend more.
Yeah, well, this is kind of comes as there is kind of this broad consensus that's emerged over at the Capitol that the state does need to put more into education. A lot of this is because of this lawsuit that the state has lost and is appealing a second part of that now. But and I think that this land trust plan, a lot of that seemed like it was kind of in response to some of the flack that Ducey was taking over the budget, over education spending, and a big part of that was this big number, 2.2 billion, 360 billion or so a year for the first 5 years. And going back to the fiscal cliff issue, the problem is if you find some way to kind of even that out, then you have to lower that number, maybe flatten things out. The number's not as big. Maybe it doesn't look as impressive once the governor's fond of saying that he's putting more money, new money into K-12 education next year than any other state. How does this affect that? Does it really make it seem as appealing if you have to kind of flatten out those rates?
I think the governor faces a lot of political pressure on this. He has political aspirations, as we all know, maybe beyond this office. And I think he took a lot of hits for the university spending cuts in the budget and how they handle the budget, because everything's dire, and then fiscal wise, and then now we have this surplus. And so I think they're hearing from rank and file business owners beyond his kind of allies in the business community that get behind things he does. So you have the kind of the real business people out there, and I think some of the poll numbers, especially with women Republicans, women independents, were really disappointed in how the budget went. And so there's a push on he's getting to do something now, do something big now, not something that takes a ballot measure.
Well, Hank, let's put Governor Ducey in the therapist chair then for a second. What does this tell us about him? You mentioned the Republic editorial. Does this tell us anything about his leadership style? People have been wondering the first 9 or 10 months in office, what can we read from him? He seemed like he could potentially be a compromiser, and other issues, not at all.
I think more than anything, this signals possibly an end to the honeymoon. All the Republican lawmakers really wanted Ducey to succeed. They came off of years of pretty bad relations with Governor Brewer. And so last year, when he proposed his budget, there was very little pushback. It flew through the legislature in record time. And a lot of them afterwards saw, the state's revenues were kind of turning around. We have this surplus. We had the ability to not make some of these really deep cuts to universities, to other places. And that's how the governor chose to approach it. And lawmakers went along with that. And I think they got a lot of pushback. And now they're saying, wait a minute, maybe we don't just follow this governor no matter what.
Jeremy, you cover the governor very closely.
Yeah, I think I think there's no doubt he'll have to do some compromising here. I mean, every governor does. I mean, if you want to take a my way or the highway approach, it's not going to get you very far. I mean, remember Governor Brewer had to fight really hard to get some things through the legislature that had a lot of Republican opposition, and it really cost her in terms of her relationship with a lot of the lawmakers.
It'd be interesting to see how pragmatic he is on this. His messaging is so disciplined. The access that he gives to some of the media is kind of limited, and so we don't always get an idea of how pragmatic he is. But does he follow Brewer's Medicaid formula, where she relied on some Democrats for something? Will they play along with a Ducey plan, or does he have to have all Republicans?
And Democrats are kind of sensing an opening here. I've talked to a couple of the leaders in both the House and the Senate who say, hey, don't forget about us. We're here. We could provide those necessary votes. But, they have a list of demands that they want to see as well.
And, is Governor Ducey going to want to go along with those demands? Some of those include, Prop 301, the sales tax from that measure, reauthorizing that. It expires in 2021. I have to imagine that that would be at the top of any Democratic wish list. And can Ducey really sell that to the Republicans? Or do you go the full, as Mike mentioned, the full Medicaid coalition where you have a small handful of Republicans in the entire Democratic caucus? I don't think that's the way Governor Ducey wants to go.
And Jeremy, you mentioned the education lawsuit. Your colleague in the Arizona Capital Times talked about a possible grand bargain. What would it take for a grand bargain to happen, and what are some elements who would be involved in it?
It is hard to imagine. I mean, the Prop 301 tax, this 0.6% of a sales tax increase that the voters approved in 2000, as I mentioned, expires in 2021. That would probably have to be part of that. I mean, Governor Ducey and legislative leadership and education leaders have been meeting, around the clock for weeks now. I ran into a couple of them on their way up to the 8th floor of the tower a couple of days ago. They meet a lot with Kirk Adams, Governor Ducey's chief of staff, with some of the legislative leadership. They're trying to find a solution, and so far, after weeks of meeting constantly, they have not found that yet.
Well, the governor has some real challenges. He wants to be pure on taxes, right? He opposed the sales tax extension. He doesn't want to come across with a George H.W. Bush, flip-flop on taxes. He has to address this education spending thing. It's the number one issue for a lot of people in the state. It's a black eye for the state's economic development. We always rank very low in terms of spending. Our high school dropout rates are too high. And this is something that I think he wants to address. But then he's facing these Republicans on the right that are really stuck in the mud on some of these issues, and he has issues not only state trust land, but finding this kind of grand compromise. So he has a lot of factors he's got to have to overcome.
Yeah, I think at this point they're really looking for a small compromise, something, and that may be something that's on the horizons for years to come, a real hard look at how we fund our schools, maybe revamping that system entirely. But right now, I mean, the focus is on the state land trust and whatever else we need to do to get that through. Mm-hmm.
But all the talk about the land trust and this possible special session, I think that is very much tied into the lawsuit and any potential grand bargain, because you have to satisfy everyone. Ducey can't get a special session for land trust because of some of the things that Senate President Biggs wants right now. I don't know how far he's willing to go to give in to some of the requests of the K-12 folks to settle this lawsuit, but I don't know if Biggs or House Speaker Gowan will either of them will be in favor of that. There's so many people you have to satisfy, and they're all coming from so many different directions here.
And the governor, of course, has his classroom's first council, which we still have to watch as well. Mike, one of the greatest mustaches in the history of the state capitol is with Doug Quelland.
Yes.
And Doug has decided he wants to change what the Independent Redistricting Commission looks like. Give us a little background on what the commission looks like now and what changes he wants to make.
Yeah, you have 5 members now, right? Two Republicans, 2 Democrats, and a supposedly independent chair. That didn't turn out so well in the last cycle when Republicans felt the chair sided with Democrats, and there's been big fights, but nobody's been happy with this thing. So he wants to go 3-3-3, kind of a Herman Cain type thing. Have 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, 3 independents, right? And he has a good argument. Quelland's an independent. He's run as an independent in the legislature for a number of times. Independents are, I think, they're the largest block of voters now, and a lot of people identify that way. And when these folks draw the lines, they draw partisan lines, and so this puts independents at the table. So you'd have 9 people total, and the chairs would be picked by the people on the panel now. So you would have a vice chair and a chair, and hopefully it would give independents a voice in these lines. The question is whether this thing would ever even come close to getting on the ballot, considering you'd have both political parties against this thing.
I have to feel like we can't even talk about whether it can get on the ballot. We just have to talk, because it may or may not, Jeremy. Go ahead, please.
No, I think it's pretty unlikely to get on the ballot unless Doug Quelland has a bunch of money for this campaign that we're unaware of. Now, the idea itself, is in some ways is very similar to things that have been proposed or enacted in other states, where you have, a larger body, more representation from all 3 of these factions, and you need, under Quelland's proposal, you would need 7 votes to get any map passed, which means you need at least 1 vote from every one of those 3 factions. Now, what stands out about this proposal as kind of curious is the way that these members are produced, or they're selected, is that the Democratic and Republican leaders in the legislature would do it, and so would the independents, if there are any in the legislature, which of course there are not. Now, if there are no elected independent legislators, this devolves to independent candidates for the legislature who get the most votes. But there's a little wrinkle in that under the current draft, in order for an independent candidate to make that pick, they have to have run in a race where they are also running against a Republican and independent. In last year's election, there was only one independent legislative candidate who filled those criteria, and that was Doug Quelland, who runs as an independent in his old district every year against the people who replaced him since he got kicked out of the legislature for clean elections violations, has been trying to make his comeback. He was a Republican, now he's an independent, and of course he is also again running for LD20 Senate as an independent next year as well.
Yeah, this is totally self-serving and ridiculous. I mean, there are people at the legislature who are talking about the exact same thing, legitimate people, Republicans, who are talking about adding independent members to the IRC, and they may actually go ahead and refer something like that to the ballot, but Doug Quelland's proposal isn't going to go anywhere.
And I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen something like this from the legislature so far. Back in 2011, we had this giant fight over redistricting when, as Mike mentioned, the independent chair, Colleen Mathis, was siding with the Democrats and the Republicans were getting outvoted. You were starting to see proposals from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to expand the size of the commission, maybe more independents, make it so that everything doesn't swing based on this one independent chair who may or may not actually be independent. And since then, it's been crickets chirping.
Well, to put the political side science hat on a little bit. There's an argument to be made whether anybody's really an independent. You know, people lean one way or another. They lean Republican, they lean Democrat. Voters do that. Elected officials who claim they're independent do that. There might be conservatives or more liberal. And if push comes to shove, are you going to maybe side with one side or another? So when we talk about independence, a lot of times it's a disaffection with political parties, but it doesn't mean there's no attachment there. And so, you know, these folks that would be independent in this panel, they might not necessarily be these kind of neutral arbiters that we would hope they would be.
Well, regardless of whether it's self-serving for Quellen, though, I do wonder when we consider the registration that independents have now, does this make sense, putting your political science hat back on? Does it make sense logically, even if it never happens?
Yeah, I mean, there's no good way to draw lines. The legislature does it, it's gerrymandering. You pick another way, you appoint people, the governor might appoint them. The governor has control. This current system with 5, it has some drawbacks which came about from Republicans' perspective. You would always kind of subjective in terms of who's drawing the lines and how they're drawing them. But you do have, it would balance it out, and it does kind of maybe reflect the political realities of American politics in Arizona right now, because you do have a lot of independents, and they get frozen out just like third parties get frozen out of a lot of things.
Well, the problem with trying to create a system that really favors independence, or districts that favor independence, as Doug Quellen wants to do, is that independents don't all think the same. If they all had the same opinion, they would have a political party, but they don't. They're independents, which technically under the law is party not designated. They don't actually have a party, which means, even though they are the largest group of voters in the state, and there are a lot of ways where the current election system works against them, such as, as Quellen could tell you, actually getting on the ballot, it's hard to find a way to create a district that will, favor independence or stuff like that.
One of the interesting things that he threw in there, though, was that it would take almost like a supermajority to approve a map. It would be 7 of the 9 members, which might kind of negate some of the partisanship one way or another. You'd have to be at least pulling some of those independent votes to your side.
Hank, final thought on this one, though. Is this an example of good government that people will ultimately, again, won't happen, we don't think, but that people will ultimately complain about? Clean elections, great idea. Term limits, great idea. And then all of a sudden, once they put it into practice, that's one of the struggles, I think, for a lot of people when it comes to even issues like this, is let's get people excited, let's get people amped up, let's give independence more priority, and then all of a sudden, wait a second, this didn't really work the way we wanted it to.
Well, it may not work the way that, is predicted, but I don't think it can get any worse. And, we're stuck with the IRC as it is. We had the U.S. Supreme Court case on that, and, it upheld the IRC. So one way or another, we're having an IRC. It's just, how do you exactly want to formulate that?
If this could move away from incumbent protection and one-party rule and have competitive districts, that's the biggest challenge both in Congress and state legislatures throughout the country, is you have folks on both sides representing districts where they just have to win in the primary. They don't have to worry about a general election. And if they win, the way they win in that primary, especially in a state like Arizona, is often to be pretty far to the right for Republicans, to the left for Democrats. And it kind of squeezes out kind of a moderates voices. And there's no accountability there because you're kind of in a safe district as long as your LD folks and your district party folks are happy with you. So if it would do that, it could work. But like you said, these other things, term limits, clean elections, have had all kinds of unintended consequences.
And Mike, let's move on to the 9 finalists now for the next Arizona Supreme Court Justice seat. Do you know any of these 9?
Yeah, Clint Bullock is the Chief Justice is retiring. Clint Bullock, a big conservative libertarian name. He is with the Goldwater Institute, pals with Jeb Bush, wrote the immigration book with Jeb Bush, friends with Clarence Thomas. He's a really well known in conservative circles. He's the only one I think on there that's not a sitting judge. He's a litigator with the Goldwater Institute. They've challenged a lot of things related to incentives, subsidies, racial preferences. He's adjudicated a lot of cases on so-called school choice. He's the biggest name on there. There's a bunch of appeals court judges on there. Daisy Flores, the former Gila County attorney's on there too. But Clint's the big name. Whether he gets it, we'll have to see.
And Governor Ducey is going to take a much bigger role, Jeremy. You wrote an interesting piece about that.
Yeah, this is a bit of a change. This will be Governor Ducey's first Supreme Court pick. He's picked some Superior Court and Court of Appeals judges so far, but he has a kind of an enhanced system compared to the way his predecessors have vetted their judges. Normally the Commission on Appellate Court appointments, they interview them, they figure out who the finalists are, send them to the governor. You get a sit-down interview with the governor and maybe some of their staff, and they decide which one they want. Now you have an extra layer there. You have, before you get up to see Governor Ducey, you have to sit down with Mike Liberty, his general counsel, his chief deputy, Kate King, a couple other folks maybe with some legal backgrounds. They're gonna interview you, kind of grill you on some of the finer points of the law, very substantive issues that matter to the governor, such as separation of powers, rulemaking. You got to do that before you get to the governor. You have to submit 1 or 2 writing samples on some issues that they're going to choose. You have to go through an enhanced background check, which kind of makes me wonder if there have been some issues with old arrests, maybe people with old arrests maybe slipping through or something. But I think the interviews and the writing sample, these are really the big parts. They're doing Governor Ducey wants to do a much more thorough job of figuring out who he's going to put on the bench.
I think it's very much his CEO hat coming out on that one, doing his due diligence on something like that. And look, if he doesn't picks anybody else on the list, it's not a huge story. It's a big story. But if he picks Bullock, that's a bigger story, kind of maybe nationally, at least within Republican Party circles.
In speaking with retiring Justice Birch, she told me that they really felt pride, many of the justices, that these were not political decisions that they made. And it does seem like when we hear this about Governor Ducey and Mike Liberty, et cetera, it reminds me more of when the U.S. Supreme Court, when the presidents choose their justices. Very much litmus testy, it seems like this. And I wonder, going forward, does this indicate anything to you, Hank, about how Governor Ducey goes about his business? Do you think he's going to want someone that goes down this list of issues, as Jeremy mentioned?
I think probably he does. I mean, that's not an unreasonable expectation. I think that, it's kind of interesting that he's putting all this in place in his first pick coming up here. It'll be very curious to see who he picks and kind of how this whole process plays out.
I think he wants. I think Governor Ducey wants some broad latitude here. The commission has to send at least 3, names to him. Only 2 of them can be, at the most, can be from the same party. Michael Liberty, when he went and spoke with the commission on the governor's behalf, said, "Hey, don't be afraid to send us more than the minimum. We want to see some more names." And, that would certainly indicate that he wants kind of a broad range to choose from. And incidentally, you mentioned Clinton Bullock. It's usually 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat who get sent up there, at least for a Republican governor. Doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be 2 Republicans and an independent, which is what Clinton Bullock is. But if you get more names, if you get 6 and then you end up with 4 Republicans and a Democrat and an independent, you get a lot more to choose from. And I think that's certainly something the Governor Ducey is looking for. Governors have always kind of wanted more power over the system, and Ducey may be the first in a long time to really get it.
I think there's some trickle down nationally among Republicans. They feel a lot of buyer's remorse from Supreme Court picks. John Roberts sided with Obamacare, Souter, those types of picks where the Republicans have picked them and they haven't turned out to be as conservative as maybe folks on the right had hoped. So when you're having people do a writing sample, how do you feel about XY issues or this kind of case? It kind of stems from that. I think this is kind of a national Republican thing where when they're picking a judge, whether it's at the state level or federal level, they're going to make sure that they'll toe the line on some of the conservative issues.
But we haven't really had that same problem where people are, changing their opinions after being on the bench for a long time. Most of our Supreme Court decisions come down unanimous. So, this may be a way to start kind of changing that and influencing a little bit, how we pick these people and vis-a-vis, what they decide.
And Hank, based on what Mike had to say about conservatives, segue into this week the Center for Arizona Policy marked its 20th anniversary. A lot of influence down at the Capitol. Many people may have even thought, wow, I can't believe it lasted 20 years. What are you hearing from lawmakers right now? Why is it that the CAP has been able to have so much power and influence, and is it growing?
Yeah, I mean, they are definitely one of the most influential groups at the Capitol, have been for many years. I think, a lot of their success is attributable to the fact that generally our lawmakers agree with them. They come from kind of the same background on the positions, but there's also a lot of backlash to these people. They're the ones who are pushing Senate Bill 1062 a couple of years back, the big religious freedom bill. That left Arizona with a pretty bad black eye, and I think that there are some lawmakers who, Republican lawmakers even, who are saying their tactics are a little bit too bully. They've gone a little bit too far on a lot of these things. They've brought us into court many a time, and lost a lot of those cases, and the state has footed the bill.
Well, sure. I mean, a big part of what they want to do is push the envelope, and that's going to get you in court a lot of time. Maybe you lose a lawsuit here or there, but you also win some. You get a lot of policies that don't end up in court at all, and they've really, especially in the past 6-7 years since Jan Brewer replaced Janet Napolitano. I mean, it's been kind of a renaissance for them. They've really been able to get a lot of stuff through that, of course, never would have made it past the desk of a Democratic governor. But now they had Brewer, who is a strong social conservative. They have Governor Ducey, who is Kathy Harris certainly has his ear. It just kind of remains to be seen what their agenda will be, next year.
They've carried the water for some other social conservatives down there. The LDS Church isn't always vocal about some of their stances down there. Conservative Catholics, the Archdiocese isn't always vocal about things. And Kathy is more than willing to be the vocal point of that and take some of the heat. And so they've kind of stepped in where the other groups haven't and kind of carried that agenda. Certainly there's folks in the business community that are frustrated, with them and like to see somebody take them on. But they're again, a lot of the legislatures agree with them.
And very briefly, what can we look forward to in 2016 from the CAP?
Hard to say. I haven't heard much about what their agenda will be. I mean, of course, in the off session, we had the big U.S. Supreme Court case on gay marriage. I'm sure there will be some sort of response to that. It's kind of hard to imagine what. Hank, you mentioned Senate Bill 1062. Governor Ducey has said, once as soon as he came in that, he wouldn't sign that. He would veto it if it came back, or a 1062-like bill. But I'm sure there are plenty of other things. I'm sure they're working hard over there, figure out exactly what will be on that agenda next year.
Jeremy, Hank, Mike, thanks for the conversation. Monday on Arizona Horizon, we'll hear from a consumer advocate about data breaches and cybersecurity, and the co-founder and former editor-in-chief of Bloomberg News will speak to journalism students at ASU. That's Monday at 5:30 and 10 on Arizona Horizon. I'm Steve Goldstein. Thanks very much for joining us. Have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.